Across Europe, massive Roman roads stretch into empty countryside, leading nowhere. In the jungles of Central America, towering Mayan temples sit half-swallowed by vines and trees. These civilizations once ruled enormous territories. They commanded armies, built monuments, and shaped the lives of millions. And then, almost suddenly, they faded. Their cities emptied, their systems failed, nature reclaimed what humans abandoned. When people think of the Vikings, they often imagine the same ending, of violent people who arrived in longships, burned coastal towns, terrified Europe for a few centuries, and then disappeared. In popular culture, Vikings are often treated as a brief historical explosion, a culture that burned too fast and too hot to last. But that story misses the truth. The Vikings did not collapse like so many other ancient societies. They didn't fall apart under their own weight, nor did they vanish when times became difficult. Instead, they adapted, evolved, and quietly merged into the world they helped reshape. Their success wasn't built on stone cities or powerful empires. It was built on flexibility, cooperation, and a deep understanding of survival. To understand why Viking society endured, you first have to understand where it began. Northern Europe was not an easy place to live. Long winters swallowed the land in darkness for months at a time. Crops failed often, storms battered the coasts without warning. Hunger was never far away. In such an environment, rigid societies struggled to survive. Any system that relied too heavily on strict hierarchy or fragile leadership quickly collapsed. The Vikings learned early that survival required balance. One of the greatest threats to ancient societies wasn't invasion, it was internal conflict. In many cultures, disputes over land, animals, or honor quickly turned into violent feuds. These feuds dragged families and villages into endless cycles of revenge. Over time, they weakened entire civilizations from within. The Vikings found a different solution. Instead of allowing conflict to spiral into violence, they created a system called the Thing. Several times a year, people gathered in open fields to resolve disputes publicly. Farmers, warriors, traders, and elders stood together, not as enemies, but as participants in a shared system. At the center of the assembly stood the law speaker, a respected figure responsible for memorizing and reciting all laws aloud. In a world where laws were not widely written down, this ensured fairness and transparency. Everyone heard the same rules, everyone knew what was expected. Punishment rarely involved execution or imprisonment. Instead, it focused on fines, compensation, or repairing harm. This reduced bloodshed and prevented grudges from destroying communities. When people believe a system is fair, they defend it. Viking society stayed strong because its people felt heard, not oppressed. Leadership followed the same principle. Unlike many ancient civilizations ruled by absolute kings, Viking leaders, known as jarls, held power only as long as they deserved it. Authority wasn't guaranteed by birth alone. A leader had to protect his people, distribute resources fairly, and act with honor. If he failed, support vanished. People could, and did, choose to follow someone else. This system created natural accountability. While unchecked rulers destroyed empires through corruption and greed, Viking leaders were forced to remain connected to their communities. Power was not something to hoard, it was something to earn again and again. Daily life reinforced this shared responsibility. In the north, no one survived alone. Every winter demanded preparation, cooperation, and trust. Farmers stored grain, hunters provided meat, fishermen braved icy waters, blacksmiths repaired tools and weapons, weavers made clothing thick enough to withstand freezing winds. Each role mattered because each role kept someone alive. Women played a vital role in this system. When men traveled for trade, exploration, or warfare, women managed farms, controlled food supplies, handled finances, and made legal decisions. Their authority was recognized and respected. Children, too, were taught responsibility early. They learned that survival depended on contribution. This created a powerful social safety net. If a family suffered a loss, the community stepped in, not out of charity, but necessity. A weakened neighbor meant a weakened village. Cooperation was not optional, it was survival. Despite their fearsome reputation, the Vikings were not sustained by violence. Raiding made for dramatic stories, but trade built lasting stability. Viking longships were among the most advanced vessels of their time. Light, fast, and versatile, they could cross open oceans or glide through shallow rivers. Some were even dragged over land to reach new waterways. These ships opened trade routes no one else could access. The Vikings became skilled merchants and middlemen. They traded furs, amber, honey, and iron for silver, silk, spices, and grain from distant regions. Their economy did not rely on a single crop or territory. If farming failed at home, trade filled the gap. If resources grew scarce, ships brought alternatives. Civilizations that depend on one food source or trade route often collapse when conditions change. Viking society survived because it never placed all its hope in one solution. But their greatest strength was adaptability. Many civilizations failed because they refused to change. When old systems stopped working, leaders clung to tradition rather than adjusting. The Vikings did the opposite. They observed, learned, and adapted. When they settled new lands, they didn't force old habits onto unfamiliar environments. They learned from local populations. They changed farming methods to match new soil. They altered clothing for different climates. They redesigned buildings to conserve heat or allow airflow. When farming became unreliable, they turned to fishing and seal hunting. When raiding became dangerous or unprofitable, many Vikings abandoned it altogether. Over time, they blended into the cultures they encountered, leaving behind language, laws, and traditions rather than ruins. At the heart of Viking life was one powerful belief: the group mattered more than the individual. This belief was reflected in the Longhouse, a shared home where families gathered around a central fire. Food was shared. Warmth was shared. Stories were shared. No one faced hardship alone. If a father died at sea, the village helped raise his children. If food ran low, it was divided rather than hoarded. This mindset created resilience stronger than stone walls. Weapons can destroy buildings, but they cannot easily destroy a community that refuses to abandon its people. The Vikings survived brutal winters not because they were stronger, but because they understood that when one person starves, the entire village becomes weaker. Their story still matters today. The Vikings remind us that fair systems prevent collapse. Adaptability allows societies to survive change. Cooperation builds strength that outlasts conquest. They proved that a civilization does not need towering monuments or golden crowns to endure. It needs people who listen to one another, leaders who remain accountable, and communities that refuse to face hardship alone. The Viking society did not collapse. It evolved, and in doing so, left behind lessons that still shape the modern world.